I'm just now realizing how difficult it is to be a Pokemon that was extinct. Like, the modern world just isn't made for this body. I wonder how today's Pokemon were able to acclimate themselves so well to the world around them.
Well, we can point to different cataclysmic events over time, but also just survival of the fittest can determine which ones will live and which ones will take the route your species did. Instead of just individual Pokemon though, how about we take a look at how entire typings could potentially perish as time goes on? So, which typing were you thinking of, Prime?
Well, with recent developments in Scarlet and Violet news, the electric typing seems to be pretty hyped up at the moment. I mean, just take a look at Bellibolt. It's all new and super fresh, so we've got to start here. I, for one, hate the electric typing because it causes me such pain, but perhaps that makes it perfect to discuss as our topic today. So I guess, welcome to an all-new version-exclusive series. How could this Pokemon type go extinct?
So I'll start us off here with a devastating worldwide event that we should all be familiar with. Think about the ramifications if Team Magma had actually managed to accomplish their goals. Imagine this. Maxie accomplishes his goals over Archie, controlling Groudon and succeeding in dwindling down the planet's oceans, creating far more dry land for creatures to live on. Now, of course, electric-type Pokemon mostly live on land, but having that much in abundance would, in theory, create a huge opportunity for ground types to overpopulate, creating far more predators for the electric type, being that that's their only weakness at their core.
Could you imagine if a Garchomp and its whole crew just rolled up on a bunch of unsuspecting electric types that were just trying to enjoy some time in the sun? This Garchomp-led band of brothers would begin beating down on those electric types so badly that you'd have to imagine many would probably be killed off in the process, suddenly destroying local populations of your many different electric types like Magnemite and Elekid. I mean, it sort of feels like a Pokemon exactly like Garchomp would become the ultimate electric killer, and with less water, that would also mean less ice, and thus there probably wouldn't be anything that could really stand up against these guys other than a few fellow dragons and some fairy-type Pokemon. You know, I'm super glad Team Magma failed. That would have been a scary situation for all of us if Maxie got what he wanted.
Another event we could probably look at would be the Earth's magnetic field weakening. Look, this field isn't actually one that I'm very well versed in, but it does seem that, in addition to other potentially strange and devastating effects on the planet, this would create some problems for the electric-type Pokemon that inhabit it. I know a lot of these Pokemon generate electricity from the inside, but I don't think it's far-fetched to think that the planet and how it operates doesn't have some sort of effect on them. Firstly, some Pokemon would probably just straight up not be able to evolve. Magneton, Nosepass, and Charjabug used to require the presence of a special magnetic field in order to evolve into their final forms, so that would just go right out the window. Or so it would seem, but they've recently been able to evolve with Thunderstones, which is super convenient, but it also begs the question of why? Well, I would imagine that perhaps Thunderstones have also been affected by these magnetic fields over time, absorbing their energy and allowing these electric types to evolve far easier, with the exception of Nosepass, of course. But naturally, if these fields disappeared, then it would be safe to assume that so too would the power now in the Thunderstones, and maybe even the stones themselves, leaving the rest of those Pokemon stranded without a final evolution. So without being able to evolve into your Jolteons, your Magnezones, and your Raichus, you'll have a plethora of weaker Pokemon up for the taking with much stronger Pokemon that they're weak to.
That would honestly be horrifying, and I don't know how long these Pokemon could survive without evolving. Like, one would think if left completely untouched by trainers and other wild Pokemon alike, maybe if given an extremely long period of time, evolution could literally take its course. And these Pokemon could transform into entirely different creatures by way of just generally leveling up, but we have no way of knowing for sure. As a matter of fact, I'd be willing to wager a scythe that we'd never even find out, since not only would these Pokemon probably not be able to stay alive long enough to evolve naturally, but also none of us could possibly survive long enough to find out ourselves. How about this, though? What if we played a direct part in the destruction of electric-type Pokemon's major power sources and natural habitats? Say we move away from traditional ways of getting electricity, like with fossil fuels, and implement different ways to power our needs, whether that be through wind, solar, or nuclear means, and have those be the main source. This would probably result in traditional power plants getting a complete overhaul, becoming foreign to Pokemon, and also it would take time for these changes to all be implemented properly and just might take too long for certain Pokemon to acclimate. I mean, if it were nuclear, would Pokemon really want to hang out that close to a bunch of radiation unless they could really handle it, just so they could get some man-made electricity? We know that electric-type Pokemon could for sure survive without having access to a ton of that man-made electricity. I mean, they certainly could kick some butt in Hisui if anyone got too close, but the literal shock to their system that would come from a potential change in our electricity intake and how we produce it would weaken them, perhaps enough that would leave them susceptible to predators and perhaps unable to truly generate their own electricity as much as they could have. It's sort of like why they tell you not to feed wild animals. They'll associate food with humans and then fail when having to search for it in the wild. If all we do is make electricity super convenient for electric types to have access to, I think there could be reason to believe that their own natural ability to generate some electricity could be weakened due to just how little they've really needed to rely on that.
You know, I really wasn't on board with you at all until those last few sentences there. Perhaps the electric types of today could be far weaker because of their dependency on us, whether it be directly or indirectly. But what I would like to take a look at now are some other scenarios that aren't quite so devastating to the world as a whole, and more specifically target the electric types. When we look at the stats of the average fully evolved electric type Pokemon, we can see that they're decently fast, pretty strong in their special attack, and just alright at best everywhere else. So really their biggest threat, based on averages, would be a fast, physically hard-hitting ground type. And two Pokemon that fit that bill are both Dugtrio and its Alolan counterpart. So in a scenario where these moles overpopulate in mass and spread to many different regions of the world, they could single-handedly wipe out the majority of land-dwelling electric types. Of course, that doesn't ensure their total extinction, but it wouldn't be pretty for them. What other Pokemon do you think would probably contribute to cases like this, Prime?
Well, as we discussed earlier, in a weird Team Magma envisioned world, Garchomp could probably be a massive threat to electric types of all kinds. But I think of also just how many bug electric types there are. There's only two, but bugs, are pretty plentiful. They might think that they can outmaneuver flying types, but I'll tell you what, Talonflame and Charizard are a couple of strong and fast attackers that would probably make quick prey of a Joltik and a Grubbin, decimating their population easily. They're still bugs after all, and as we know of bugs in the real world, there are tons of them, and we can believe that to be the case with Pokemon too. Eating into their population would put such a massive dent in the overall amount of electric types on the planet. I'd also like to highlight the Mamoswine line. There are very few electric types that would want to deal with an onslaught from them. Also, while we can believe that Lantern would be okay living in the ocean, there's pretty much no electric type that can deal with both ground and ice type moves regardless of their possible additional typings.
On that note, we literally have just one line of Pokemon that have the water electric type in being Lantern, so it's not like a bunch of Pokemon have to be taken out anyways. But thinking about all of the different circumstances we've put the electric types through, it does seem that a good few would be able to escape with their lives, at least initially. All the dual flying types are safe from the ground, the dual water types as previously mentioned, Rotom with Levitate, and finally Hisui and Electrode. But here's the thing, being that Hisui is just Sinnoh from the past, we can already assume that Hisui and Electrode have already died out. So that's not really an issue there. So now we just have Rotom and the flying types left. For the flying types, those can easily get knocked down. Gravity and Smackdown are effective ways to bring them down to Earth, but they could even fall to their own roosts. Plus, you've got the likes of Zygarde with 1,000 Arrows that just ignores all of that. So if it ever decided the balance of the world would be determined by the extinction of the electric types, well, not much would be able to stand in its way. But you'd have to assume that once it got to those few of Pokemon left standing, that they'd eventually just evolve in order to survive, dropping their electric typing and leading a new life. I feel like that's a very easy conclusion to come to when everything is said and done, so don't be surprised if you hear us say that again in the future.
So, I guess we could sort of wrap up the thought process here by discussing one last major thing. Do we think this is at all likely in the context of the Pokemon world? For me, I don't think there'll ever be a circumstance that could wipe out all electric types. There's of course Lantern in the water, which could avoid easily a horrible fate, just by hiding in the water. But you have to wonder why it would even keep the electric typing over time when it seems more of a detriment than anything else. I mean, at best it could fend it from other water types, but then you have your Quagsire and such that will come through and mess with it. We know Team Magma failed in their plan, so that was just a what-if kind of thought, and the only super plausible hypothetical I could see playing out is the human race changing how they use electricity, and thus possibly putting a very complacent electric typing in danger by no longer having the excess energy all over the place for them to feed upon.
Well, I certainly will say that you can never say it's an impossibility that it could happen. However, I'd lean towards more that it's improbable that the electric type goes extinct anytime soon. So long as people like Maxie are kept at bay, the Dugtrio populations are kept in check, and Zygarde doesn't go insane.
So that's it then. The electric typing has officially been put on notice. You are not invincible. You are not safe. And you will no longer scare me. Just knowing that at any point a Dugtrio can run up on a Manectric and devour it from its legs up makes me feel very safe.
Well, that's very erratic thinking. I think most Pokemon are living in harmony, so the fact that you feel that way is pretty concerning, Prime.
Listen, when you've been what I've been through, and I've gone through a lot, you get erratic with your thinking. You know that, That's why you keep me in the cage, and that's why I'm going to think about more ways for other Pokemon typings to go extinct in the future.
You're sick. You're sick! Though I guess letting you go through these thoughts will help me figure out a way to stop you or anybody else, so I say we should continue our research into this topic. But I guess for now we can leave it here. How did you feel about the scenarios that we talked about here today, and were there any that we didn't really consider? Let us both know in the comments section down below. And with that said, I'm Collector Dexter.
And you know what? I'm the Prime Directive. I'm gonna go get in my cage, and we'll see you all next time.